Okay.
Andrew, thanks so much for having this conversation with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jeff, for having me come on and talk, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So my story with you actually started, I think we're about like 10 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
When you
about
and I
10
first
years.
met?
It's about 10 years.
Um, Interestingly enough, before we met or when we met, we had no idea that we had those parallels of Guy Voyer. But unfortunately, I had a family member who took a really bad fall, had a traumatic brain injury, and she went to, neurologists in Rhode Island. Nobody could help. Went to the best people in Boston, right? Like very high level medical groups in Boston, and people said, well, you can sit in a dark room and we can give you medication. And it wasn't until, through my connections, getting in touch with you, you were the only guy who could start getting rid of her headaches. You were the only guy who could start getting rid of her nausea. You were the only person who could start getting her back to a functioning level. And I know I'm kind of foreshadowing some of these questions moving forward, but like that was without medication. So, the way I look at it, you did what nobody else could, and that's actually what started my journey of studying under you for all those years. And you and I still have conversations every other week to help keep my level up on the neuro side. So it's been great. That's been great.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to help one of your family members. I also appreciate all your kind words. And we're just, here I enjoy to learn and see how we can help people. That's really what it comes down to, the passion of, just learning different things and just being able to, help people and give an alternative way of how to look at things that is, really easy. There's really no risk. So in a lot of these cases, if they work, it really works well, but there's no risk to try to work with us.
Totally, totally, totally. So if you don't mind, just give us a little bit of a background of, who you are and how you came to be what you do now.
Yeah, so I've been alternative health 25 years. So I started my career out in the sports injuries. And as Jeff talked about, I have my master's in exercise science, and then I've done manual therapy on multiple levels. Guy Voyer was one of the people. Keith Pine is another person I
Yeah.
studied under. Mike Clark, who was he was the part of the NASM and team physical therapist of the Phoenix Suns, and corrective exercise, Paul Chek. So these are the kind of people I've studied from. And then I wanted to get a deeper level on how we can help more people. And I thought that the neuroscience would be like a way, because of the cases in neuroscience affected more people, and they affected their function and livelihoods. So my whole thing is, how do we help more people? So the sports injuries has been great. I've been doing that all the way up the last 25 years. About 19 years ago, I got into the neuroscience, and a doctor who specializes in functional rehab in the neuro area, and on the chiropractic side, I learned from him, and I took about 4 years and about 36 courses from him, and I was just hooked. I loved it, and I continued learning for about 15 years on my own. I was studying a lot of different books that he was recommending. Like, there was a very good neurologist called Hal Blumenfeld at Yale. So I learned from him. And probably then my favorite book that I've learned of all time, which was very interesting, which I started studying about 13 years ago, was from David Z., who's now retired at Johns Hopkins.
Mhm.
And he's probably the foremost expert in the world on eye movements and brain function. And it's interesting that the eyes are really the link that can link to every parts of the brain and brain stem. So he had a gold standard book called The Neurology of Eye Movements, and since 2013, I studied that book. the Hal Blumenfeld neuroanatomy book and a bunch of other books, and Susan Herdman and vestibular rehab book. And then my trajectory changed again a little bit. In 2023, I was I was part of the first course at Johns Hopkins for a vestibular competency course. So I took 2023 and I took the course in 2024 and passed my competency, and I got to learn from an incredible physical therapist who's also has a doctorate and a postdoc, Michael Schubert, and he's the lead. He's one of the top researchers in there, and I was learning from them. And along the way, I also, about 8+ years ago, I wanted to get all this work out. And with technology that has been in it coming and over the years, I developed a software for brain injuries called the
Hmm.
Accomplished Brain software.
Yep.
And amazing, we have an exercise platform, we have 8 programs and 30 activities. We have virtual reality, vestibular, eye movement program, sensory program, and we've been able to help so many practitioners. Geoff has actually been using the program for himself and for his company. And now we're launching using AI. We're launching 2 new evaluations for vertigo testing and for vestibular testing. So we're taking the cost of these devices and bringing it down to a very small analysis cost for us to allow more practitioners to be able to, utilize these evaluations and the exercise platform with their patients. So that's kind of what my journey is just a kind of mix of many neuroscience, so sports injuries, manual therapy, corrective exercise, moving into the neuroscience, learning a lot on my own, taking courses at Johns Hopkins, and then being able to develop the software. And just appreciate Geoff a lot. He's been a big advocate of what we've been doing, from referring people, him using the software, and his company.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think on my end, I've been around long enough to see whether it's an orthopedic issue, back pain, some sort of neurological issue going on, that medication seems to be something very quickly people move to. And arguably, right, like we can sit here and say, oh, is that a problem with the medical doctors? I don't know. Maybe it's a problem on both, the patient and the doctor. I'm not so sure. I personally think there is a time and a place for medication. I'm not totally against it, but do you mind just speaking a little bit about your methodology, your philosophy on how you work with people that usually doesn't include medication?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to share the types of cases that we've been able to work with. So concussion, traumatic brain injury, stroke, Parkinson's, balance disorders, kids with ADHD, attention, focus, vertigo, dizziness, balance issues. So those are pretty much the cases that we've been able to see some really, really good results. And really, it comes down to a philosophy of trying to utilize sensory exercises. So what is sensory exercise? It's eye movements, it's vestibular head movements, using the limbs. They call that using moving either the arms or legs, doing sound breathing program, a sensory program, obviously using rhythm and timing or coordination. Those are kind of such the exercises that we use. And then the key is to, based on the history of what their function or what they're having problems with, and then looking at functional tests. So I look at some vestibular tests, we look at eye movement tests, we look at balance, we look at coordination and watching them walk. And why do we do that is because all those tests are functional tests that represents how different areas of the brain and nervous system are functioning. So once we find out like where an area that it's an issue, the next thing you want to look at is how does that area respond if you give it exercise?
Hmm.
And then the other thing, and here's the two-part question is, well, what happens if you give it an exercise and they don't respond? Well, how do you know if they're going to respond good or bad? Well, you could repeat the test. Did the test get better? Um, or sometimes if they have some kind of symptoms, are their symptoms either worse after they do the exercise? So once you kind of you listen to their history that tells you what their areas of issue are, which tell you what part of the brain is an issue, and then you do those functional tests. You have a window of, okay, here's where the issue is. And then the second thing is, well, how does that issue respond to exercise? And if it doesn't respond, then what's the next thing you do is, this is kind of where the artistry of where we've been able to come in is we can kind of go into another area because we know that like the musculoskeletal system, like if you have a back problem, you might have a foot and ankle problem, right?
Hmm.
And we know everything is connected. So it's the same thing in the nervous system. We can go to another area and we can give it exercise that area will eventually come back around to activate the area that you have an issue, but where it will not where it will be able to handle the exercise appropriately. And how would you know? You again, you go in, you see if the symptoms got better. How would
Right.
you know? You repeat the evaluation test. You see if those tests get better
Right.
because they're functional tests. And a lot of times you'll give them, here's the problem, you give them exercise over here. Or the other thing that makes up this whole formula is, how many repetitions do you give them?
Right.
If you're using the software and you have colors, what kind of color you give them? How fast do the targets go? These are all little things that make huge differences. And obviously, so how can you build the program? I have a lot of experience. So
Right.
we've had probably over 500 people use the software very successfully. So I have patterns in my head and that's what we're working on now in the software is developing more protocols and patterns to help the practitioners. But yeah, I mean that's really the philosophy is history, functional test, understand where the issue is, and then how does that area respond to exercise? If it does, you give them that that exercise. If you don't, you now think about what other areas can connect to that area. Can you give exercise in another area that they overall might respond really well? And if you do that, we usually have pretty good success.
Yeah, sure. And so it sounds like you work on a lot of different things on a wide spectrum. Can you just compare for me how you would look or how you would execute working with someone like with a neurodegenerative issue like Parkinson's versus someone who has ADD?
Yeah, okay. So this is really good. So Parkinson's, they have obviously slowness of movement.
Hmm.
So sometimes we actually have a whole program um, called LSVT, and for Parkinson's long, big movements we have in our sensory program. So long, big, fast movements, they can really help. Obviously, the other thing we've seen is doing vestibular exercises, so head and eye movements. Those usually help a lot. Now, somebody who has the difference with that, so Parkinson's is a slowness of movement. So we want to have big, long type movements. We want to have faster movements. We want to use the vestibular system. That seems to help a lot. Um, with people who have ADHD, you have your lobes of your brain, so your frontal lobe, and the most lateral part of your frontal lobe is your prefrontal cortex. And a lot of times that's the area of the brain that needs to light up to calm the system down, to get them to one, to be calm, second, to attend and focus. And we usually use what has been very successful is we use an eye movement called an anti-saccade. Basically, if a target comes out basically your eyes look in the opposite direction. And the reason being is when when a target is going to come out, your brain is going to want your eyes to move towards that target. So if your brain has to inhibit that movement, it has to concentrate. So it has to attend and it has to concentrate and it has to focus and says, no, I'm not going to go towards the target. I'm actually going to move my eyes opposite. Well, that takes up a lot of attention, a lot of focus, and that lights up the prefrontal cortex. And that seems
Mm.
to help a lot. It's pretty interesting because that same anti-saccade, if a target comes out, your eye moves to in the opposite direction, seems to help a lot to with people who have can have seizures, people who have strokes and have overactivity and they have spasticity in the muscles. So we've used that with stroke patients. We've used that with people who have anxiety. We use that with people who have like, motor tics or seizures. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, here at Rep, we have a lot of people who are kind of on that longevity trend, right? They feel pretty good now, but their big concern is being at optimal levels for as long as possible. So, could you kind of give us your three biggest lifestyle points for people who want longevity from a neurological or from a brain standpoint?
Yeah, so I think that the a pillar one thing is really important is sleep and quality of sleep. So I think that and there's things that you can do, we can do a whole kind of cast on like the more details of being able to fall asleep, stay asleep. But I'd say sleep is probably one of the most important things. I would say the other thing is, um, in the neurological sense, is your balance, and that's going to deal with your balance, and then I would say another thing that's probably really important is resistance training. So I would say, well, let me couple this together. Let me say sleep, balance, and walking together, right? And then resistance training. And if you throw in a fourth, I would say your nutrition, like, is really important. So those are your pillars
Yeah.
of health. And I'd say it's hard because I care so much, is really about what your energy level and your thoughts are. So if you have good thoughts, you sleep well, you got good balance, you can walk pretty much daily, and you can do some light resistance training coupled with some good nutrition. And I know it was supposed to be three, but I care too much about the audience.
Sure.
But I'd say those are your pillars of health. If you could sleep,
Yeah.
if you could get up and you have good thoughts in your head, you can get some good sleep. You can your ability to balance and walk and get walking in is really important. Some resistance training and then couple of that with some good nutrition. I think that's a really good formula for having longevity.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to just highlight one thing really quick that I think is so commonly overgeneralized is like I think that so many people out there think of balance of like how well can I stand on one foot? And it's like balance is so much more than that. And I think we're talking about yes, obviously like a big component of balance comes from the inner
So let
ear.
me so let me explain the three systems. So balance you have three systems in balance, right? So you have one is that your ability of the muscles. You have
Hmm.
receptors called proprioceptors that send information to your brain where your body part, where your foot and ankle and knee and hip is in place. And I know Geoff does a tremendous job with Guy Voyer's work and proprioceptive exercise, and
Yep.
those are really important.
Yep.
The other two that Geoff covers very well, and we're working with me, is your eyes, your vision, and then your inner ear vestibular system. Basically,
Sure.
when you move your head, as you see I'm moving now, you have your ear canal, fluid moves through, activates the brainstem and the eye. So the vestibular and eye system is linked together. So your inner ear vestibular and your vestibular system is very important because it's your sense of your orientation on where you are in space. So your brain is going to get information from those three systems. And if those three systems are working well, you can ability to stand up, your ability to know where you are, your body is in space, and then your ability to be able to walk, to be able to turn is very important.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I find, like, funny enough, I think one really unique thing to work on balance is actually going for a hike, like
Yeah.
going for some unstable ground, scenery that you haven't seen before. I think that's like an awesome, awesome
Yeah,
exercise to work
because
on
you got to
balance.
remember when you're going on an unstable surface, you're going to rely more on your vestibular system.
Yeah,
And it's funny because you know, I just recently saw um, a video of Lionel Messi, the soccer player for
sure.
Argentina that they say now that he's arguably one of the best, if not the best of all time. And in Argentina, they created on the field a little sand area for him to train. And he was training
Nice.
in the sand. It's very interesting. When we worked with Guy Voyer, he talked a lot about doing movements and walking in the sand. And the reason is once you do that, you're relying on that unsurface, you're
Yeah.
relying more on your inner ear vestibular system. And it's very interesting because the vestibular system acts as one of the components, but it acts as one of the processing centers to process all the information. So basically, the vestibular system is acting as one of the three balance components, which the brain has to get information from that system, the visual system, and the muscle system called the proprioceptors. And then the other thing is it takes all that information and makes some kind of mathematical computation, and the vestibular system helps with that process.
Mm,
So that's one of the reasons when you see people train in the sand and or like Geoff said, go on a hike, you're relying on that system, and the more that you can train and that system is healthy, the overall better your balance, your walking is going to be, and overall better a component of the longevity.
sure. Definitely. Definitely. Okay, tell us the bad news about homework. And I bring that up because, as you know, we're constantly giving people on our end, myofascial stretching and Aldoa. And if you do those things like once or twice a week, your results won't be so good. So, can you tell me from a neuro side, if we really want to create change in the brain or really want to create neuroplasticity, what's the reality for us for homework?
Yeah, so basically the if I would say the two C's are really important, consistency and continuous. So what I
Hmm.
mean by that is if you're consistently doing your exercise and you're continuously doing your program as well over long a nice amount of time, or you're seeing your practitioner, and that's the limitation to what I've seen of getting the results.
Totally.
And I'm comfortable at 25 years doing this to comfortably say that I can help a lot of people. How much I can help them. Sometimes it does it can be how severe their case could be, just a very hard case. The other factor is of helping people is how much they're actually going to do.
Yeah.
So I'm over the time. I'm here just to help. So I'm comfortable wherever the client goes because they'll get better at some levels. But obviously, one of the factors is them to be consistent. And what usually happens is in neuroplasticity, you want to make more connections. So the more neuronal connections you can make, the stronger, the better you can improve the functionality. So
Hmm.
like an example is if you have a problem with your balance, and the more that you can do the vestibular exercises, the more neurons you can connect together, the better that area will function, the better your overall balance will be. And usually that takes about 7 to 10 days of consistently doing the exercises. you'll start to make more connections.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you do that 30 days, you make more connections.
Hmm.
You do that
Interesting.
60 days or 90 days, you're going to make more connections. So
Right.
it's the consistency of doing the program, you know, and I've seen, even if clients, like in my case, sometimes, I'll ask them I'll say 1 to 3 times. And sometimes in the beginning, they'll get 2 or 3 times. But then I say at least that once a day. You're getting once a day, every day. Over a period of time, you'll start to see a lot of improvements.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Okay, we've both used Eldoa. I have used it in a combination of different ways, but can you just talk to me a little bit of how Eldoa could potentially help people in the cases that you're working with?
Yeah, so Eldora is good because what we talked about is a lot of times the nervous system is, not all the times, but a lot of times the nervous system is firing extremely high. So
Hmm.
it needs to calm the system down. And one of the things Aldoa can do, um, by firing receptors in the joint, right? And they call them joint mechanoreceptors. And those receptors can cause what they call an inhibitory effect. And that's just a fancy word to calm the system down. So there's tremendous effects on the fluid and the mechanical part that Geoff is doing, and making sure that the integrity of the space of the joint is working very well, um, and which will help your overall posture. But then from a neurological standpoint, the Eldoa is really good because it just calms that system down, because it's firing a receptor. It's called a mechanoreceptor, and that mechanoreceptor can have an inhibitory calming effect on the nervous system.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've used it on my end anywhere from concussion to like just stress management. Um, it seems to really help people a lot.
Yeah.
Cool. I think one last thing is you and I I would drive to New Jersey, study under you once a week. We would do that for a long, long time. You now have your software out at physical therapy clinics. My facility is using it. Do you want to just give a very quick explanation of how people can lease your software?
Yeah, so basically, if you're in the neuro field, or work with neurological based clients, we have a fantastic software. The components of the software, we have um, we have a dashboard that sits in Amazon's cloud, and that allows you to set your patients up. It allows you to set the specific brain programs and activities. That moves right over to our app. So that's the second part of our software. Is we have an app. We have two. We have an exercise app, and then we have another app for that we have launched for evaluations. With the evaluations, you just launch the app once and you move through the exercise app, because they're both apps are linked. So we have 8 programs. We have programs like eye movements on the phone. We have vestibular. We have virtual reality vestibular. We have mirror therapy for strokes. So we have an augmented reality sensory program, and then we're launching 2 new programs for vertigo testing and for vestibular testing. So if you're a
Nice.
clinic and you think that you work with these types of cases, we have a wonderful software that you can work in your clinic. It can work in telehealth, as well as you can deliver those. The patients can do the programs on the app. We have an app on Apple and Android, and when they move their programs over, all the patient does is log in and press play. We're actually also in the process of making global record protocols. So it's even easier for you guys as practitioners. You just search for, what type of exercise you want, and then you click and you put it right on your patient's phone.
Yeah, that's great. And I can even say on my end, our facility is not necessarily crawling with people that are trying to recover from concussion per se, but it is interesting of we'll get people in who say, hey, I want to work on X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden you find out, later than you should, oh, I have chronic migraines. Hey, I think this software can really help you. Or hey, I really have um, an issue with when I'm driving. I feel like the world around me is spinning too much. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, this software can actually help you. So even for someone like myself, that's not solely based on working with neurological disorders, we find that this software really comes in handy for us to kind of be like, hey, here's the cherry on top of our service. So,
Easy to use and really easy for your patients to use.
yeah,
And we have a variety of programs from virtual reality to just on the phone, vestibular, ocular. We have breathing program, sensory program, and then we have evaluation tools for vertigo and for vestibular conditions.
great. Awesome. Yeah, you guys keep getting better, and we appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate you too.
All right. Thank you, Andrew, so much for joining me today. Had an awesome discussion talking about functional neuroscience and your approach and how you've helped us so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You got
All
it.
right.